Hello, my dear friends. Welcome to week 2. This week we are going to talk with you about teaching online. Actually, it is going to be a short introduction into this topic because now we will talk about teaching online every time we talk about a new topic. We will develop on receptive skills next week and then we will talk about teaching them online. Later on, we will talk about productive skills and we will also talk about teaching them online. But this week we are going to talk about different introductory concepts that you must understand in order to teach online successfully. And our first lesson is going to be very simple because we are going just to talk about some peculiarities of working online. This is something I have learned the hard way, and many of these things I have learned from my practical experience because when I started teaching online, I tried to do it in exactly the way I taught offline in a real classroom. But it turned out that many concepts that were very productive while I was teaching in the classroom turned out to be a total waste of time when I started teaching online. So my main idea today is to give you a few suggestions about how you can work online more effectively. And working online, you will face different challenges. Some of them are going to be more marketing challenges. This will um, make you think a lot about how to promote your services, about the advantages and disadvantages that online teaching gives to you. Some problems are purely methodological. You will have to work in a slightly different way to ensure success of your students. Some problems will be technical because you will have to think about a lot of technical stuff in order to make your class successful. And now I'm going to talk about those points and to give you some clearer ideas. So in what way are online classes different from our real classrooms? First of all, we must remember that when we start teaching online, on the one hand, there is more competition because if you teach offline in a real classroom, you compete only with the teachers who live in the same city, more often in the same district. But when you teach online, you compete with all teachers who teach English in the world, and you have to compete a lot with native speakers, which sometimes can be very challenging, especially if your self-esteem is low and you do not really understand what your strengths are. But teaching online also gives you more opportunities because you are not limited by the glass ceiling of the salary in your region anymore. And you have more opportunities for earning money. You have more opportunities for attracting new students, and you also have more opportunities for teaching massive online courses. So teaching online is not only one-to-one or group classes, but you can also provide massive online courses, and this is also a kind of a teaching process. Then another important thing is that teaching online can be more demanding in physical terms because very often when we teach, especially in a language school, we have very long gaps in between classes. Usually, a normal schedule looks like that. You have a class in the morning, then you can have a gap of about 2 or 3 hours, then you have a couple of classes in the afternoon, and then in the evening, it is really hard time for you and you have 3 to 4 classes one by one. But when you teach online, due to the difference in time zones, you can have students living in absolutely different time zones, and that gives you an opportunity to have more classes. But if you have more classes and fewer and shorter breaks, you are going to get very tired. And you must remember about that, and you must control your working time and your rest time very well. Because first, all teachers who start teaching online and who feel that they are successful and they can attract more and more students start making, start really, you know, cramming their classes into their schedule, not because they're greedy, but because they feel that they can lose their opportunities, and then they overwork, and then they get extremely tired. So be sensible. Try to organize your schedule so that you can rest during the day, and don't have situations when you have like 9 to 10 classes one by one. This is not a good idea. You will lose a lot of energy and you will not be able to survive like that for a very long time. Remember, you need breaks. Then, when it comes to group classes, when you teach online, you would normally have smaller groups. For example, when I taught offline, I sometimes could have 15 to 16 people in my classroom. And in this case, I used the communicative approach and I was more like a supervisor. I made them speak in between each other in groups, in pairs, in groups of 3, in groups of 4, and I listened to them, I helped them, I corrected their mistakes. So I was a supervisor, I was a facilitator. When I started teaching online, I realized very quickly that a group of 15 people would not work online. This is something that you can't really do effectively, also because of some technical problems we will discuss tomorrow. But I have come to the conclusion that the maximum number of people you can have in a group while teaching online is 6. 6 is a good number in general because this is the situation when you can still make them talk in between each other and you can still control it very well. The fewer people you have, the better, but 6 is your maximum number. If you're going to have more than 6, you can't teach in a usual way. You can't teach face-to-face. You will have to provide a massive online course or the so-called MOOC. So, and then you can include speaking sessions, which are individual or speaking sessions in small groups. But it's impossible to have a group of more than 6 people and teach effectively online. Then teaching online, you will definitely face the predominance of one-to-one classes. If you don't choose doing MOOCs, you will have to teach one-to-one a lot because this is much easier. Your students do not have to agree upon the time because they live in different time zones. It will be much easier for you to organize it and you have more chances of getting more money just because you provide some expensive programs with high results, but one-to-one programs. Many of you have the predominance of one-to-one classes in any case. If you work as private tutors, normally you are hired to teach one person. If you work for a language school, then normally you will have a group. Yeah? But if you're a private tutor, then this predominance is actually what you have now, so you shouldn't be so worried about that. But you must remember that the better you market your one-to-one classes, the more special you make them, the easier it will be for you to attract customers. When you teach online, there are a lot of technical elements that you must think about in advance. Tomorrow we will talk with you about some very simple things, about the background, by the way, my background is not good, so and we will talk about it tomorrow, but I hope you will forgive me for that. We will talk about the background, we will talk about light, we will talk about other pieces of software that you can use, but you must have a lot of technical elements in place to be able to provide a really good class. And here it is important to remember one important thing. The technical elements that you use should not be complicated for you. Because if you start using something very sophisticated, there is a huge number of online tools and they appear again and again, again and again. Every month I see 5 to 10 new online tools, different types of online whiteboards, different types of cloud services, different types of some educational tools. 5 to 10 new things every month. Don't get overwhelmed with technical stuff and with software, because if you start learning every single thing that appears in the market, it will drive you crazy. You will not have any time for planning your classes. You will not have any time for working with your students. That is why don't get overwhelmed. Choose something simple that you can use with confidence, that you are not worried about, and that gives you the result. Your uh, technical tools must be simply good enough. They don't have to be perfect. If you look for perfection, you will waste a lot of time. And then from the methodological point of view, your online classes are going to be much faster. Everything that happens online is much faster than the similar things happening in real life. The communication is much faster. Setting relationship with people is much faster. Becoming friends with people is much faster. And the same is about learning experience. It is much faster. And that is why you will have to change activities at a much faster rate, at a much faster pace. And this is something that is important to remember. Then, when we teach receptive skills, they can seem pretty boring online. If you start reading online, it will take a lot of time, and uh, students will be bored. They will not understand why they have to sit in front of their laptop and read silently with you. The same is about listening. You can listen if you need it to facilitate some speaking activity. It is possible, no problem here. But if you take something really massive for listening, it is going to be very boring. That is why when you train receptive skills, you either devote a short time to that activity, and instead of reading the whole text, you read just 2 or 3 paragraphs to show the strategy that you want them to use, or you learn how to write very clear, very concise instructions for their homework. You create some tasks and you give them all the materials for receptive skills training for their homework. And a little bit later, when we are going to talk about planning, we will talk with you about the ideal structure of an online lesson when you give all receptive skills for the homework and then you utilize what you get from their homework for speaking activities during the class. The focus will always be on speaking. And this is like a law for online classes. Yes, you can do different things. If you need, you can practice grammar, you can drill it, you can practice pronunciation, you can show them the strategies of how to deal with the receptive skills. You can even write, you can do whatever you need to do, but the focus must be on speaking. And when we realize that the focus must be on speaking, we face another important problem, because here there is a huge pitfall of talking too much. And here we can see a very clear necessity to minimize teacher talk time when we speak and to maximize the time when your student has to speak. And in order to do that, we must choose the correct means, language means, words and patterns, and give those language means to our students in advance or drill them in a certain way before we make them speak. But we should keep in mind that the less we speak, the better it is for our students. Ideally, we should speak about 10% of the whole time of the lesson. 90% must be devoted to our students speaking. And a little bit later, we will talk with you about how to develop different ways of learning instructions without words. We will practice with you some ways of how we can show to our students that something is wrong or we want them to do something without saying anything. And finally, when it comes to writing, writing is also something that you would normally not do during the class. You can explain strategies, you can analyze models, you can discuss them, but normally writing will be provided in a different way. I very often use three different tools for practicing writing with my students. First of all, these are exchanges via messengers. I ask my students to send me a message every day answering several questions. What is the best thing that has happened to you today? What makes that important? What is the best thing you have done for your English today? What makes that important? And I make them write to me every single day. Then I ask them to use journaling techniques. And here I use different questions and they have to write every day a short text of 5 to 10 sentences in the form of a journal, in the form of a diary. And then the third type I use is a kind of a written practice based on a listening activity. I make them listen to something at home as a part of their homework, and then they have to write the summary of what they have heard. And these are three writing activities that works perfectly for online classes. The only problem is that if you have to teach an exam class, then you will have to do something different because you should practice the exact format that you will have at the exam. But this is something that we are going to talk a little bit later, and I think we are going to discuss this point during our feedback webinars. So these are all peculiarities of teaching online that I feel are really important. You are likely to find something of your own that you perceive as something being important, but be absolutely free, feel absolutely free to add your ideas in the commentaries, and we are going to discuss them during our next webinar. Think about the peculiarities of teaching online that you find important and formulate them just for your understanding. And I will see you tomorrow and we will talk about two main issues. We will talk about technical elements, the light that we need, the backgrounds that we need, and we will talk about different platforms that we can use for teaching. Thank you very much for being with me today, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.